The desert was strangely quiet that morning. Not peaceful, not calm, just quiet, like something enormous was holding its breath. For 6 days, two worlds had stared at each other across the Yarmouk Valley. On one side, the Eastern Roman Empire, armored and disciplined, carrying the weight of centuries. On the other, the newly risen forces of the Rashidun Caliphate, fewer in number but burning with a sense of destiny. And now, on the final morning, the wind began to change. It swept across the dry earth, past broken shrubs and scattered stones, until it reached the Roman lines, thousands of shields gleaming under a pale sun. Veteran officers watched the horizon, sensing something they could not yet name. Whispers spread through the ranks. Why is the wind blowing east? It never blows east. Across the valley, the Muslim commander, Khalid ibn al-Walid, lifted his eyes. He felt the wind on his face, warm and steady, almost guiding. He said nothing. He didn't have to. Every battle has a moment when the world tilts. For Yarmouk, this was the first tilt. To understand why Yarmouk mattered, you have to understand who marched into it. The Roman army was massive. Tens of thousands of infantry, cavalry, archers, and armored cataphracts whose charge could shatter walls. They believed victory was inevitable, almost guaranteed. For centuries, Rome had pushed others aside. Why would this be different? But the Muslims who stood against them were not an ordinary frontier tribe. They were veterans from the campaigns of Syria and Iraq, men hardened by desert marches, sudden ambushes, and the weight of believing their cause was greater than themselves. What Rome saw as a rebellion, they saw as a calling. The two armies studied each other for days. Their camps spread across ridges and ravines, campfires glowing at night like twin constellations carved into the earth. Roman generals debated strategies late into the night. Some argued for negotiation. Others demanded a crushing advance. But fear, quiet, unspoken fear, kept creeping into their councils. They had faced many enemies, but never one who refused to break. Across the valley, Khalid walked the length of his lines. He spoke to archers tightening their bowstrings, to cavalry brushing dust from their horses, to infantry sharpening steel in the early light. His voice was calm, steady, focused. You already know the desert, he told them. You already know hardship. All that remains is to finish what we began. The men nodded, not shouting, not cheering, just nodding, because they understood. Destiny doesn't need noise, only direction. At dawn, horns sounded across the valley, deep, rolling, echoing across the stone and sand. The Roman infantry advanced first, shields locked, spears angled forward, dust rising around their boots. The ground trembled as they moved. Khalid gave a single order, not shouted, just sent through his officers like a pulse. Hold! The first impact was brutal. Roman shields slammed into Muslim lines with the weight of a moving fortress. Steel rang. Sand erupted. Men vanished behind a storm of dust and blades. But the Rashidun infantry absorbed the blow. They bent, but did not break. Then came the Roman cataphracts, armored horses, armored riders, unstoppable momentum. They crashed into the Muslim right flank, scattering men, cracking shields, sending entire rows stumbling backward. For a moment, it looked like the Romans might punch a hole straight through the line. Khalid saw it, and he moved. With speed that stunned even his own officers, he redirected cavalry from the reserve. Their horses thundered down the ridge, cutting a sharp line through the rising dust. They struck the Roman flank at an angle, short, vicious, perfectly timed. The battlefield turned into a maze of swirling cavalry, clashing infantry, and splintered spears. Cries of men mixed with the iron rhythm of war. The Romans pushed hard, the Muslims held firm, and the valley began to feel small. Too small for two futures. This was no longer a battle of strength. It was a battle of will. By the third afternoon, both armies were exhausted, battered, bruised, dehydrated. But neither stepped back. The Romans launched a massive assault on the Muslim left, hoping to collapse the flank and roll up the entire line. Their infantry surged forward, shield walls gleaming in the sunlight. Archers rained volleys behind them. For the first time, the Muslim line buckled. Men were pushed off the ridge. Entire units were forced down toward the ravine. Roman commanders saw an opening, and they committed everything. Then, the wind shifted. A hot, sweeping gust came roaring across the valley, blowing dust straight into the Roman faces. Their archers struggled to see. Their infantry, shield walls faltered. The sun glared directly into their eyes. Khalid reacted instantly. He ordered a feigned retreat on the left, drawing the Romans deeper, pulling them down the slope, stretching their formation thin, too thin. Then he unleashed his cavalry. From the high ridges, they poured down like a breaking wave, dust exploding beneath hooves, steel flashing in the afternoon sun. They smashed into the Roman flanks, slicing through the exposed edges of the advancing line. Roman formations collapsed inward, crushed by the sudden momentum. Units tried to turn, but the dust blinded them. Commands were lost in the wind. The valley was no longer silent. It roared, a sound like the earth itself exhaling after holding its breath. By the fifth day, the Roman position was crumbling, not suddenly, but steadily, like stone worn down by waves. Their cavalry had been beaten back. Their infantry formations were breaking apart. And worst of all, the cliffs and ravines of Yarmouk trapped them with nowhere to retreat. Khalid saw the moment. He ordered a full encirclement. Cavalry swept wide, cutting off escape routes. Infantry surged forward with renewed purpose, step by step, shield by shield. Archers positioned on the high ground rained arrows into the tightening Roman mass. Roman officers shouted for order, for tighter ranks, for a fighting withdrawal, for anything. But the valley was no longer a battlefield. It was a funnel. Thousands of Roman soldiers were pressed toward the Yarmouk Gorge, the steep cliffs rising around them like the walls of a closing cage. Some tried to climb, some tried to push through, some simply curled behind their shields, waiting for the end. But the Muslim cavalry struck one final time, a sweeping charge from the west that shattered whatever order remained. The Roman army, once the pride of the Eastern Empire, collapsed, not with a scream, not with a roar, but with a long, shuddering exhale, as if an entire era had just given up its last breath. When the sun rose on the final morning, the valley was silent again. But not the same silence as before. This silence was after the dust settled, after the shouting stopped, after one world ended and another began. Roman survivors fled north, carrying news that would shake the empire to its core. Syria was lost, the frontier was gone, and the desert, once dismissed as empty and insignificant, had produced a force capable of reshaping history. Khalid stood on a ridge overlooking the valley. His armor was dented, his cloak torn, his horse exhausted, but his voice was steady when he said to the men beside him, "This is not the end, this is the beginning." And he was right. Yarmouk was more than a victory, it was a hinge, a turning point where the weight of centuries shifted from one empire to another. The desert wind moved again, slow and warm, brushing across the battlefield as if erasing the last traces of what had been. History would remember many battles, but few so clearly divided the world into before and after.